Hola, familia. Welcome back to MsMalcolmHughes, the podcast where we discuss love and life lessons learned the hard way. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. What's your name?
Delisa.
Lisa. All right. And today, we're actually going to be getting into a pretty heavy topic. So, we're going to discuss domestic violence, or the technical term is intimate partner abuse in the Black lesbian community. This topic actually came about because I was scrolling on Instagram and I actually saw the story. It was the first day of the new year. So, as you all know, 2020 was very hard for all of us. So, we all had high aspirations and hopes coming into 2021. And then on the first day of the new year, I'm actually scrolling and I see a story about LaKerica Dowdy. And most of you will know her as Willie Queen from Charm City Kings. If you've seen it, if you haven't, it is a movie that covers the biker community in Baltimore. And the header of the article was saying that Willie Queen from Charm City Kings had fatally stabbed her girlfriend, Tiffany Wilson. And when I read that, I immediately paused, and it was super alarming and a bit triggering because for me, it immediately called back a topic that I think we all know is really prevalent in the community, but we never really discuss it. And that is domestic violence in the Black lesbian community. And obviously, domestic violence doesn't just happen in Black communities or lesbian communities or queer communities. But what I really wanted to hone in on and really focus on is the fact that it is so prevalent and happens so frequently in the Black lesbian community, but we never talk about it. So I really wanted to take this time to focus on us specifically. So just jumping right in, we'll discuss where things stand with Lacaria throughout the podcast, but the issue really isn't her, right? She's just a representation of a larger issue that we know occurs. But because it did spark this conversation, certain facts from that article and that story will come up just to really root and base the conversation. First things first, the first question I want to ask you is actually, let me pause. Is there anything you want people to know about you before we get started?
Um, I guess I'm a lesbian and I would be considered like a dominant lesbian or whatnot. So
Dominant what? I'm just kidding.
yeah, so I guess hearing the story is kind of like, I can kind of relate to it, I guess, in a way. Being a health and fitness instructor, a lot of times sexuality does come up. And me being like an educator myself, like sometimes I have to have like these conversations with some of like the younger students
Mhm.
about like relationships that they are in.
So, first question that I have for you is how prevalent do you actually think domestic violence is in the Black lesbian community?
Um, so honestly, I think that this is a thing that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of times when you hear domestic violence, you automatically think of like a heterosexual relationship. And like you said, we were gonna bring up the article a few times that we both read, and they did mention in that article how even with research, you kind of just hear about like heterosexual relationships, but
Mhm.
it is
Let me
very
pause you.
common.
Okay.
Um,
Let me pause you real quick. So
yeah.
the article that Delisa talking about right now is actually it's an article, and I'll link it below. But it's intimate partner abuse in the among Black lesbians, and it's a academic article from some folks at Howard who actually did this research study, and I think it's super relevant to what we're discussing because a lot of research on this topic doesn't exist, even though we do know that it's an issue. So I'm glad we were able to find this, and I want to make sure other folks can read it as well. But go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah. Definitely read the article. It is so good. So much information that you can definitely like pass on to other people for sure. But yeah, it is just extremely common in the lesbian community, especially the African American lesbian community. I was telling Portia about the fact that now I'm 33, but throughout like I'm a lesbian as well, and throughout my time of like dating females, um, I've encountered domestic violence myself. While it wasn't to the point
Mhm.
of Dottie. Her last name is Dottie. I'm going to call her
Yeah,
that because I think
that's
that's
fine.
easier for me to say. Not to the point of that situation, but definitely just a lot easier, to escalate. I
Mhm.
guess being two females, whether it be like a more dominant female, one that's a lot more feminine. At the end of the day, like being looked at as two females, and then just like the emotional ties and just so many other things that just
Yeah.
like come into play when it comes to um, the intimate partner abuse, honestly. So extremely, you know, prevalent. Just like, and I'm just super glad that you brought this topic up. Honestly, I've been waiting to talk about this, and after reading about it and doing everything, and even reading about her and like watching her
Yeah.
interviews and stuff like that, I'm just like, man, I just want to know so much more about this.
I
So
know. Like,
yeah.
same. 'Cause there are a number of factors in like their dynamic in their relationship that I want to get into. One is the age difference.
Hmm.
Also I'm not actually sure if her partner was more feminine or more masculine. I'm presuming more
He was
feminine.
feminine.
He was
Yeah.
feminine, yeah. So that masculine feminine dynamic. And then also I think because I am more feminine presenting and you are more masculine presenting, I think we can both talk about different relationships we've experienced as well. Because I do think it happens all the time and it happens in more ways than we think, right? It doesn't always get physical. Sometimes it's just verbal abuse, or sometimes it's abuse that starts what would be seen as like small, right? Just small encounters. You might be a slight argument. The next thing you know, it keeps progressing over time and it becomes like a snowball effect and a totally different dynamic. But before I get into that, I do want to touch a little bit on just the statistics, so that when we talk about it, folks understand that unfortunately our experiences aren't one-offs. This is happening a lot. So one thing that the article really touched on is just the numbers, because I think that helps folks really situate it and understand it in their mind. So cases generally range from 25 to 40% as far as domestic abuse situations within Black lesbian relationships. So in the higher end, so that 40% really represents the non-physical forms of abuse, right? So that verbal abuse, the intimidation, or even coercion. And some things we don't even think about as abuse. You think of intimate partner abuse or domestic violence, and you automatically go to physical. But that verbal abuse and intimidation, like that can have a mental impact that can impact you in some ways that physical may not even. And then also another fact is just that so Blacks in America in general represent about 12% of the population, right? So not a huge number, but 40% of domestic violence or domestic homicide victims are from the Black community. So we make up 12% of the population, but we're making up 40% of domestic homicide victims. And I think that's jarring. And one thing that the article really speaks to is a number of the factors that cause this, but I want to get into that a little bit later when we're talking about the causes. So just thinking about like your experiences dating women, right? You first started dating women when you were how old?
I would say 17. I was
Okay.
17 when I first started dating women. Yeah.
So 17 to 33, right? So a good number of years. What would you say has been your experience in different relationships over time that has either been intimate partner abuse that has become physical or just intimate partner abuse in the other ways in which we've discussed? So either verbal abuse, intimidation, or coercion. And then how did you handle the situation when it arose?
Hmm. So I think that experience like plays a major part in just like how you go about things and just I don't know. I guess when I was 17, I would say that the people who I dated are completely different than the people who I would date today at 33.
Hopefully.
So yeah, you either learn from your experiences and you kind of just like are able to move on from them. But that's why I'm glad that you don't touch on like where a lot of this stuff actually stems from. So when I was 17, through maybe like the age of like 22, 23, I was always a whole lot younger than the people who I dated. So kind of in the case of Dottie,
Yeah.
where she dated someone who was 7 years older than her,
Hmm.
I can say that, you know, there were a lot of times where I was probably like being manipulated or people were probably jealous of me. Maybe because of like at my age, being in college, I would be dating women who did not have like the educational background, as I did, or didn't have any of the same experiences that I had.
Right.
So jealousy was just like a major issue. But at 17, 18, even 19 to 23, honestly, it wasn't anything that I could really see at first. So a lot of times it would start out as just like, verbal abuse or whatnot. And so at this point, this is all I know because I haven't been in many relationships. I was only
Hmm.
17 when I first started dating women. So these are my first relationships. So
Right.
this is what I know a relationship to be. Um, even if I try to compare it to like my mom and my dad, that was hard too because again they're heterosexual and then
Right.
they're also a whole lot older. So like times have changed. This is what you are believing at this point because you have an older adult who's kind of like making you feel like, yeah, relationships have ups and downs, but sometimes like those downs are like extremely unhealthy,
Right.
like just off completely. So it would start with the verbal abuse, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it was a lot easier for like a female to like, maybe push me first, or
Mm,
yeah, it'll be something like super small, and then if we were to get into like an argument or something, now it's turned into us, just full out fighting. So a
okay.
physical fight. Um, that actually changed me, honestly.
Mm.
So I had never been in a fight before. So to
Oh.
me, fighting was just like, yeah, like
Yeah.
fighting wasn't a thing for me. It was not a thing for me. And so when I was in a romantic relationship or intimate relationship with a
Right.
female and they put their hands on me, like now all of a sudden I'm just like, wait a minute, I gotta fight.
Right.
So so it was just crazy to know that like, this was a thing. And then just depending on like what area you're in, and like um just the African American lesbian community being small, we didn't have too many places where like everyone, was able to hang out at, and then to be at like parties or
Yeah.
any place and see like couples arguing, couples fighting, to me this was just
Man.
the norm.
Yeah.
So I felt like this is what it was like. Like this is how it should be. We argue because we're, and we fight because we're girls. It's okay because we both females at the end of the day.
Mm.
And the connection, quote unquote, would be so strong that, the good would just the good would outweigh it all. Like we would be good when it's good, but when it's bad, it's really, really bad. So it wasn't until like I started to like I got older, more experience, more exposure to like things that should be healthy, even knowing what that thing is, which a lot of people don't really know. Which is why I'm glad we have this conversation too.
Yeah.
Um, like things should be a certain type of way, or they could be a certain type of way, but like how do we actually get there? So now at 33, I'm able to like surround myself around people who are, who know what a healthy relationship is, who want to have healthy relationships with friends, with family, like with
Right.
their partners, like whomever. We know how to talk to each other. We know what coping strategies and whatnot to use, and things like that. So yes, being young, it definitely took a while for me to realize that like this is not what's supposed to be happening. Um, and it didn't necessarily take for me to like finally date another female to see that this wasn't supposed to be happening. It honestly was just about like me just seeing and like hearing about and like knowing that this is unhealthy. Here's some things that you should do when you are unhappy. Here's how you should communicate with people when you
Right.
like
Right.
feel a
Right.
certain type of way. And once I started to do that, I realized that like, yeah, it's a deeper issue with these people who I dated before in the past, and like they just haven't been able to get all these things that they needed. So
Okay. No, I think it's super. No, I think that's super dope that you touched on a lot of those factors. It's also crazy because I've known you forever, but I feel like some of our experiences are different, even though our households were different growing up, right? Like, so, like, as you know, I didn't come from a two-parent household. I was primarily raised by the woman who adopted me, which was my mother's godmother, and then as she got older, we moved in with her daughter, so I lived with my aunt and uncle, and they didn't have a healthy relationship, right? Like, so it wasn't like abusive all the time, but he was cheating, she was cheating, it would get volatile. But even still, it always felt super scary for me, right? So I never really wanted to be in those type of relationships. So even though you don't want something, doesn't mean that like it isn't a norm and you don't end up being attracted to it. So even though like I always felt like it was wrong, I ended up kind of getting in relationships where it would get not necessarily physically abusive, but I think for me, the situation was folks always kind of wanted to control me. And not that I was even super like out there or anything like that. I've just always been kind of really independent. And what others would say, I got a real smart mouth. I don't think I do, but yeah, this is debatable. So
right.
back when I was younger, like my first really serious long relationship, you know who I'm talking about. We ended up living together, and she ended up cheating, and it became a thing because I wanted to leave and I wanted her to get out. And for that, it would become like her yelling or her doing things that for me, like, it would feel like it wasn't okay, but because we were both females, it didn't feel horrible enough that I would say it was domestic violence, if it makes sense. So like we got into an argument one time and like she pushed me and I fell. And for me, I felt like that was a lot, but she felt like I was being dramatic, right? She's like, you're just being dramatic. I barely touched you. Um, or there was another situation where we got into like a really huge argument and like fight. And she like, she picked me up and she like put me on the back porch and locked me out the house. So
Oh yeah.
for me, like, even though I felt like these things were wrong, I don't think it was until we were at my sister's house and it was my nephew's birthday party. And we got into a big argument in the room because one of my ex-girlfriends showed, everybody loves my sister. So anybody I've ever dated loves my sister. They want to be around the family. That's just how it was. So one of my exes showed up at the party and she got really upset and we were arguing in a room about it. So I like stormed out the room because I'm not doing this here. This is too much. So I'm walking down the hallway and you know how you feel like someone is about to like grab you? So
Oh
like
no.
she was reaching for my hair and I put my head forward and I was just storming out and like, it was just, you could feel the tension. And I remember my sister stepping out of her room because before you got to the back porch, my sister's bedroom was there. And my sister like stepped out of her room. She was like, I don't know what you think is about to happen right now,
But it
but it's
ain't that.
not. Right? But it's not. So I'm gonna need you to go in the front and calm yourself. And I think it was that moment that made me realize, and then talking to my sister about it, after, like, this is a form of abuse, right? Like, this is not okay. It's not just like she don't love you so much that she wants to put her hands on you. This is like control. So I think that like I agree with you, like growing up, even though different situations, different backgrounds, it's still that dynamic. And I don't even think necessarily it's because it was like two girls. I was like, it's so intense. You know how they say lesbians, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is so intense, the emotions, everything moves fast.
Yep.
And you feel like it's okay, but it's not.
I know it's story time. But you know I ain't gonna tell my stories. I don't want to relive those moments.
Like
But
not always like I'm definitely not
man,
telling.
yeah, like stories, the stories are crazy. And also I'm just glad that I'm not that person anymore. And I just hope that like even having conversations like this, hopefully people can like learn
Yeah.
from them or even want to do that research so that if they are in a situation like that or know somebody else who is in one, then they would know,
I mean,
some of the things that they could do.
but I think it's also so much of what we see, right? Like, so I grew up in the hood, or even just knowing other people who grew up in the projects, or other things like that. Like, you
Mhm.
see these type of altercations all the time. Or
Yep.
even like at my sister's house, there was a lesbian couple who lived across the street. Literally every weekend, they would be in the street fighting about something.
Yep.
Every weekend. So it's like in your mind, because even like I read a lot, so I knew that like other people didn't live the way we lived, right? That was
Yep.
always a form of escape. But even though I knew that, I also saw what was around me. It was normalized, even though I didn't necessarily agree with it.
This you just took the words right out of my mouth. Literally in my head, I was like, violence is so normalized until someone dies. Like honestly, and that's when everybody wants to like wake up and say something.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure anytime they argue, if they've ever argued before in the past, maybe people, witness them arguing and stuff like that. And they would just be like, yeah, y'all crazy. And then like they'll see them right back together again and everything is just like, back to normal for everybody.
Yeah.
But now, since like someone just lost their lives, they probably wouldn't be able to stand the sight of seeing Dottie ever again in their lives because she just took someone's life. But when it was when they were, physically fighting before in the past,
Yeah.
or like, the verbal abuse and everything else that was happening in the past, it was just okay for us to just turn back around the next day and still be around each other.
Yep.
Like, that was okay.
And it's so
So
like, yeah, because even this story, it was also so disturbing. One was the age difference. And you spoke to that a little bit. I haven't like seriously dated folks who were older than me, like significantly older. I've kicked it with some, but nothing like super serious. But the piece about this as well is just the dynamics once you read more about the story. So one, it was age difference. The girlfriend was 33. Lacaria Dowdy is 26. And she was making it seem as if everything was fine. Like we were good. She doesn't know what happened, but then like, she got arrested, phones got taken, text messages came through, and they had been broken up. The girl had wanted her keys back. So this is a situation that escalated, and even reading the details of it, because Dowdy is saying that the girl stabbed herself and
Yep.
she was trying to perform CPR and save
Yep.
her. But they were like, based on the wounds, like it just, she couldn't have done it to herself. And also just like the furniture was moved, there was scuff marks, there was like pulled hair and broken jewelry on the floor. So in that dynamic, like understanding that one person was significantly older, and even like it doesn't always seem like, oh, 7 years is a huge difference. 7 years is a huge difference. Like,
Exactly.
especially when someone is younger, like that always floors me a little bit. And maybe it's because I used to be a teacher, and being in the classroom. I used to even teach seniors in high school, and they used to be like, Miss, you know, my last name, like, um, you like our age, especially when you first starting out teaching, right? You like 22, 23 or whatever. And they're like, you like our age. And I'm like, sweetheart, you're like a 12-year-old to me. Like, I don't know what you think, but you're like a child to me. Like, so it always floors me when people date significantly younger than them, because I do think either one or two things. I think one, you desire someone that you can control, or I think two, you've been like emotionally stunted at some point, and this is who you relate most to.
Yep. Yep. I agree.
So I don't know, but I do remember, like, with reading this article, the age difference really stuck out to me.
That stood out to me too. And then when I was thinking about the age difference too, I was thinking about like some of the stuff that was in that same article that we talked
Yeah,
about, and like they said like a lot of times it'll be because of like the insecurities or dependency, or like jealousy and stuff. And I was like, man, I could see that. The fact that they said in the argument, I believe she was coming back to like give her keys or something like that.
mhm,
And I'm just like, well, that leads me to believe that, like, I mean, if she didn't live with her, she had access to her house whenever she wanted to.
right.
And so to be able to like take something from her when like maybe she didn't have a lot, it was just
Yeah.
as if like, once this is gone, then what
What
I'm
do I
gonna do?
have?
You go and then
Exactly.
you 33 and you probably have like a little more going for yourself if you have like your own place, you got a car, you got stuff like that.
Yeah,
And it's a possibility that you can go off and be with anybody.
right.
So just yeah.
And even kind of what you were saying with the article, just thinking about the factors, and obviously I don't know their financial background or like history, right? But just even like poverty is a huge factor. One thing we were discussing is that history of trauma and mental health symptoms. And we never talk about that, and just the way in which people try to cope, right? So even like in my last dynamic, really just that substance abuse and how it changes a person and what do you do in that situation. And another thing is because, like, obviously I'm a woman who dates women. So just the last time I looked at the numbers, it was what, 1 in every 5 Black women has been either sexually assaulted or raped in their lifetime, right?
Mhm.
So that trauma follows you your whole life,
Yep.
right? It doesn't leave. And then people find different ways of coping with that. And that definitely impacts the way in which you date, right? When you're trying to be intimate with someone else. So that substance abuse piece really stuck out to me because I have dated multiple women who had either been sexually assaulted or raped when they were younger. And it definitely impacted our relationship.
Mhm.
Right. And it really caused to mind just one of my most recent like dynamics of just a lot had happened to her in the past. And she really try, like, her coping strategy was to self-medicate,
Yep.
right? Where the issue was is when she would get drunk or whatever, she would become reckless and volatile. So then that directly impacted us because then it changes everything. And then this does become, it becomes, I don't want to say it becomes tricky, because on one end it's like this is definitely wrong, but on the other end you also understand it because you're like, this is not who this person is all the time, and also you understand the traumas that they've been through. So I think innately you also want to be there for them. So I think when they talk about this like history of abuse and how some people don't report it or some people don't leave or some people
Mhm.
don't even consider it abuse because it is two women, and you do understand that dynamic and that trauma and that history there, and just also understanding the different types of oppression that we go through, especially
Yep.
if you're like masculine of center, right? You're
Yep.
Black, you're a woman, and then you're masculine presenting, right? So society in general has three things against you. Because when I think of intimate partner abuse, I always think of it in the form of control. And in this article, that's one of the things they really touched on, was also just that people may feel as if they don't have control outside of their home, right? Or in their everyday lives or in their professional lives. So then they come home and they try to exert that control on everything and everyone else around
Mhm.
them. And just really the, I guess, childhood traumas and all of that. So I think for me, when I think about where we stand in the community and understanding the traumas that like people have been through and how it is showing up in intimate relationships, like how do we really go on working on that and addressing it so that it doesn't continue to be the same situations?
Mm-hmm. Was that a question or you were just saying
It's a question.
it? Oh snap! Because I was gonna say something about when you were mentioning about just having like control in a way.
Yeah.
I just thought about like her position and like her clout kind of in Baltimore.
Okay.
Down
Yeah.
there, she had like a whole
Yeah.
lot of clout, right?
Yeah.
She was the only female in that 12 o'clock boys
True, for
like
sure.
fight club.
Yeah.
So she probably had like a lot of girls like throwing themselves at her and stuff like that. So yeah, so for her to have been, with a female who was 33 years old, you know, a part of that could have been like maybe, I'm feeling myself a little bit. I kind of want somebody that's a little older, maybe wasn't necessarily like on her level or whatever the case may be. I really don't know.
Right.
But I do know that like by her having like a little bit of like power in her community, she was probably well known. For somebody to be like, nah, I'm leaving you, it's just like, nah, like, I pretty much get my way when it comes to everything around here. And, you threatening to want to leave me, like, I'm not going to let you go that easily
Or
because I am
even
used to having, yeah.
or even like one thing I appreciate about the article is because I felt like it was so relevant because we don't know their dynamics, right?
Right,
And just because you got clout doesn't mean your life is good, doesn't mean you
right,
financially stable, doesn't mean you come from a good
exactly.
family. You know what I'm saying? So like
Yep,
we don't know what trauma she's experienced. So
yep,
one thing they really talk about here, and I feel like I've seen it played out with a number of my exes, is that piece of you've created this life because you didn't have that stability, right? So
yep,
even if it's like kind of like that because people go to extremes. They were discussing like the other person will idolize you and think you're perfect, right? Or
mm,
they will also like nitpick everything, but it isn't
yep,
because they want to push you away. They actually want you there, but it's like their actions are working against themselves. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So once
mhm,
they eventually do push you away and you do like get the supports that you need in order to be able to leave, for them it's triggering because so much of their identity is now rooted in you two being together. So with
yeah,
you trying to
right.
pull away, it's like you're also like taking a part of them away and they can't actually sustain that loss.
Wow, that's deep. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's real. I think that that's real. When you really do think about it, and these are the things that like people don't even think about when they actually, live in this. Like
Hmm.
these aren't even things that you necessarily think about. Um, Especially like after getting into an argument, and then like, maybe it was taken too far, but then the next day you just want things to feel normal again, so you willing to just act like that didn't even happen yesterday. Like the fact
Gee.
that you just want to just feel like, oh well, this is what we do, this is our day to day, like we still woke up the next day and went to Walmart, like
Or that's because that's
right,
some like that's all some people know, right? Like literally, I mean, you're my friend, you know this. Like, I'm not gonna get into full details, but like my last dynamic was a situation like I just never thought I would be in. And it was just crazy on a lot of different levels. So like I knew that was all she knew. Chaos was what she knew. That was normal for
yep,
her. So she would do
yep,
things that were like, for me, just bananas, like this can't be happening. And the next day she would either try to present as if once she doesn't remember that it happened, right? Like she was so drunk, like, oh, I didn't say that. I didn't do that out, right? Or also just the fact of like super apologetic.
yep,
Which, and I remember the first time she apologized, it was scary for me because it was like straight out of one of those TV moments where a person has done something super crazy and they come to you drunk, like,
right.
baby, I'm so sorry. You forgive me. I'm just like, this can't be my life. Like, this just
That
cannot
was
be my
that
life.
cycle that they mentioned, the
It
cycle of the
was.
it was a part of the cycle was at the bottom of
Yeah.
like apologizing or giving or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah,
It was all of that. And it's like, it's hard too, because I think that like, I think a lot of times when you talk to someone who's been in a certain, and I don't view myself as a victim, but when you've been in a situation that does have intimate partner abuse, often they was like, I would have never seen myself in that situation, right?
yep,
Like I just never thought I'd be in a dynamic like that. And it's crazy though, because I don't think we sometimes acknowledge our own histories and traumas, right? Of
yep,
what got us there.
yep.
So you just always think about like, oh, the abuser, but it's like also the person who was the recipient of that abuse. Like, what have they gone through that put them in that situation and that dynamic in the first place? So I think you
True.
got to look at it from like both ends because I don't know, because you also take a lot on because you be like, is it me? Like, am I triggering this person? And like, and then you
Right.
take that on and you got to realize that Like, it's not on you to fix somebody else. Cause I think sometimes you're super empathetic and you know this person,
Yep.
and you know their stories. So you like, I want to be there for them, but it's like, who there for you, sis?
Yep. You want to save people. And the thing is, and that's a part of the reason why we need like more supports for people who are going through things like that. And like, because a lot of people who, this ain't my profession to save you.
Right.
Like, it's not at all. But I feel like I am the one person who does keep you in like a more like, in a better place. But
Yeah.
how long does that actually last for you though? You know what I'm saying? And you just brought up a really good point about the victims and like saying like, well, what traumas like led you to that point? And so, what's crazy, I actually did stop to try to think of that like a lot. I was like, why would I have been with a person who like put their hands on me, who talked to me any type of way? I didn't
Yeah.
say any of this stuff to them. And just like reading the statistics and looking at the numbers and stuff like that, and I was just like, you know this isn't me. Like, none of this stuff was my life. So how did I end up with the person who was able to do all of those things to me? But then I think about like, well, where I am now, I actually learned from that, because today I'm a whole lot older and wiser. It wasn't just that I was just young and naive back then,
Mm.
or was there something that actually happened in my past, like any type of like childhood traumas or anything, that led me to even putting myself in that situation? Like, why couldn't I like dodge that bullet in a way? Like, why wasn't I smart enough to be like, yeah, no, I
No.
wasn't.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah. No, that's real. Like, that's why I think these supports are important. They discuss the different supports that people need. I think that therapy, I'm an advocate for therapy all the time for everybody. I think growing up Black in America is just traumatic in and of itself. So I think that every Black person in America needs to be in therapy, period. But then also, I think a big thing for me the last time, because I do feel like, so I feel like a lot was going on, right? Like, I feel like it was a national pandemic. So that was already you processing through your own stress and trauma, right? So that I think makes a person vulnerable. And then you want to save someone else, and you're not even grappling with how things are impacting you. But I think a thing that was a really good support for me were honestly my friends, because I did feel as if like I lost myself, but I had like a great group of friends that were like, we don't really know what's going on with you right now, but we know who you are, right? We know the person that you are, and this ain't it.
Yeah.
So it was really people who were helping to like lead me back to shore and helping me be strong in ways that I couldn't necessarily be, and just leading me back to myself. And I think that some people don't have that, but I think it's so critical,
Yep.
because a big thing with abuse is they do try to isolate you, which did try to happen. And in some cases it did happen, but I'm grateful for my friends that were like, yeah, we're not gonna leave though. Like, I see what's going on here, but we still gonna be with you, and we still gonna support you, even though we hate Shorty. So
That's a good point.
I think that's super important. Also, I just think community, man, like just having people to reach out to. And I think that's why it's so important that the certain stigmas about being gay, right? And then the false pretenses that Black women are so innately strong, so you don't need those supports, or the
So
pain,
resilient.
right? Like, the pain may not be as severe as you're making it out to be. I think all those stigmas need to go away and be removed, so that people actually feel comfortable saying that, like, hey, this is something that's going on, I need help. And for them to not to be judged when they come and say that they do need help, or shun for their sexual preferences or sexual identity.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And also just realizing that like you are in a unhealthy relationship too. Like,
yeah.
I think sometimes it's just hard to even admit that, because you call yourself like really caring about whoever your partner is.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make them out to be like a horrible person,
Yeah.
because you start thinking about the stuff that maybe you've done wrong at some point. And
Mhm.
like, we both do this. We both have. Yeah, but like both of you all also, like both of y'all probably need like this therapy. Like, honestly.
Right.
Um but it's hard for people to admit that, especially like I said, like we go through so much, and you just mentioned like it being a pandemic and stuff like that. You kind of like don't want to be alone. You
Yeah.
don't want to feel like you have nobody else or whatnot. So you just like you stick with it, and you just do it until you just don't want to do it anymore. But sometimes like it's just too late. And I think that was the case
Yeah.
with what happened with them. They said that they broke up because she had cheated or something, right? And she found out
Oh,
maybe,
I know. I
and
didn't
that's
read that.
yeah, that she had cheated. And I think Tiffany found out that she had cheated, and that's when
Mhm.
she was like texting her and telling her like, "Hey, I don't want to be with you. and like bring me my keys and stuff like that. I
Mm,
don't think she was gonna let her break up. So
yeah,
while she had just cheated on her, she also just didn't want her to break up with her.
got
Um,
you. I,
yeah, so much goes into this stuff, man. It's just
and yeah,
crazy.
I'm like, I think we've all experienced that. Like, just because someone's done you wrong, don't mean that they want to acknowledge you or like lose you. And I think I think that's why therapy is so important because none of us are perfect and we all have trauma, right? To different extents that impact us differently. But I think that also that piece of, because sometimes I don't think we always, unless you do a real self analysis and really are aware of yourself, I don't think we sometimes understand how far our rage can take us,
Hmm.
right? So this may not be have been a situation where it was premeditated at all, right? Like we just don't know the dynamics. It
Yeah,
honestly sounds like a situation that got out of control,
yeah,
right? And I think that also we gotta really do that self work to figure out where we are. Because I've definitely been in situations where I've had to remove myself because I know the temper that I have and I know how hard I work to control it. But really, in like the last dynamic, it had gotten so volatile that I was like, oh, there's nowhere else for us to go except for physical violence. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Like, I was like, we've reached such a low point that we are going to put our hands on each other. There's nowhere else for us to go. We said all the worst things that you can say to
yeah.
each other. It's gotten to the point. Like, so I think that we really have to understand like ourselves. Like, cause I don't like I don't think I'm a super like violent person by any means, but I know that in a state of rage, anything can happen. Like I'm someone who believes that anyone can commit murder, push to the right like extent. I just do. That's my belief. I think any
Ain't killing
human,
nobody.
huh?
I ain't gonna murder nobody.
You don't know that.
I,
Like that's my thing. Like you don't like given the right circumstance. That's like saying anybody can break. Like everybody got a breaking point. All you gotta do is push them to the limit.
yeah, nah, that's facts. So
So I think that's why that self work and that self control and just that ability to really understand, like, here are the things that I went through, and here's like how they've impacted me. And oftentimes you can't do that by yourself because you don't know what you don't know.
exactly, that was my point. People don't even be knowing. They don't
That's
know.
what I'm saying. Like, and honestly, even with doing self work, I think I want us to understand that it's always an evolving process. Because I had done mad self work. Like, literally, I was like, oh, I'd never be in a crazy abusive situation. Like, I could control. Like, so literally, it was like out of left field because I thought that I had grown so much already.
Hmm.
So that you got to realize that, like, some things will still trigger you. Like, the things that you went through in your past and your certain triggers, they don't necessarily go away. You just learn better means of actually coping and dealing with them.
Look, and I'm gonna tell you too. Some of those things they don't go away, and maybe you won't be in the exact same situation, like
Mhm.
in the future or whatever. Like hopefully you aren't in the same situation, but I would say that some of my traumas are still with me from my past relationships from that age 17
Yeah.
to 24 for sure. So like I don't know what I would do if somebody were to put their hands on me. Now I ain't trying to like murder anybody or anything like that,
Right.
but I do know that I get to a point of like anger, that like I probably will try to fight, and it's just like a crazy trigger for me if somebody were to just put their hands on me today. Like I don't put your hands on me. I don't care how frustrated you are. Don't hit me. Don't muff me. Don't do anything to me
Right.
because it is probably going to lead to a fight. And the last girl who put their hands on me, it did lead to a fight. And we were fighting in the middle of South Shore Drive. And I'll
You
never,
ain't got no pause. You ain't hit nobody. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
and I won. And I was like, and you don't
Thanks.
even understand. You know why I won? I won because I didn't win in the past. So you you took me there. You took me there because I wasn't fighting back in the past when I was
Right.
younger. Because I was 17, 18, and the girls that I was dating were 24, 25. But now I'm like, 20, 25, 26, and you just put your hands on me.
Right.
What? So yeah, it kind of took me there. And that's even being like the person who I am today, who like I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. I tell
Right.
my kids like we're gonna figure out different coping strategies when we get into it with people. Like we are not gonna fight. We are not gonna
Sure.
start cursing at them and getting into
Yeah.
arguments and stuff like that. We're gonna figure this whole thing out. And it's okay not to like a person. It's okay to be upset. But then you just find you sit there and you process that, and then when you are able to talk about it, then that's what we're gonna do. Um, and like that's even being the person I am today. And that's why when my kids do get into fights and stuff in school, I'm just like they pushed them. They really did take them there. and we don't know what they've been through. Like, you just don't know what they have been through. So if a person were to, if somebody was to say today, like, oh yeah, Delisa got into a fight, people would not believe them. They're gonna be like, what? No.
Yeah.
But like, those are probably people who don't know,
Right.
my past. And when it comes to like putting your hands on me, like,
Yeah.
I just can't take it anymore, because it should never be taken this far to the point where you just hit me to hurt
Yeah.
me, sis.
No, I
Like,
agree.
oh,
And I think, I think you definitely just shared a gem, because I had to impart that same knowledge on a young person close to me recently. Them and their significant other, they're a little younger. They're 17. Their significant other is 21. It's already an issue for me, but whatever. But they got into a situation that got physical. And the parent of the young person reached out to me because they're like, I can't believe this happened. So I reached out to the young person because I'm like, okay, so what happened? I need details. They're like, it didn't get physical like that. We got into it. It was an argument. I was trying to like move past her. I kind of pushed her out the way as I was going. She hit me, and it became this whole situation. And we had to really sit down and have a talk about this, because if you're in any relationship where you two can't communicate with each other, and the only way in which you guys can actually express yourselves, it becomes a situation with any type of violence involved. That's not a healthy relationship. Right? Like, y'all either need to do one or two things. Y'all got to figure out ways in which y'all can communicate and coexist together, or y'all got to determine whether or not this relationship is something that y'all both need to continue to be in. And I think that like we actually have to have these honest conversations with young people from when they're like much younger, because oftentimes, like, I came out when I was like 15. So you're out here and you're living these lives that you feel like you're grown. So you're trying to do what you've seen adults do, but what you've seen the adults around you do might not have been the right thing, right? It might not have been a healthy approach. So I think that like we actually do, from before high school, need to really start having these conversations with these young folks about actually like anger management, right? How do you deal with stress? How do you deal with conflict when something isn't going your way, or someone is saying something to you that might be a trigger? How do you know what your triggers are? Right? So I definitely, you touched on a key point with that.
And social media should probably stop, and I just wish, I know it's not gonna happen, but like, it's so like normalized again, like the whole violence thing. And these are the things that like, give you the most clout and stuff like that. So you are upset, and so you cursing somebody out, and your video is posted on social
Right.
media. Now everybody's laughing. Now everybody's like, oh, she treated her, or everybody's like, oh, he treated him, and things like that. Like, this is just the way to go. Like, if you didn't say anything, now you a punk.
Right.
As opposed to like, it really just didn't take me there. Like, there was no need for me to start arguing back with this person. So just like the stuff that they see on social media, the stuff that we see in like our communities and stuff like that, could be just like, they are just like major reasons why sometimes things just get taken, completely out of hand, especially when you are dealing with some of the like the mental health issues and things like that when it comes to like a lot of the people
I
in these relationships.
I agree fully. I think we also need to really talk about like, what does it mean for someone to actually care about you, right?
Mm,
Because a lot of times you feel like, oh, we fighting for our love, or they said X, Y, and Z, so it's like, no, if this person really cared about you the way that you say and think that they do, would they even have said such a thing to you? Would they even have wanted to take you there, right?
mm,
So is this love? Is this care? And is this the love and care you think you deserve? And if it is what you think you deserve, then that's another conversation that we need to be having, right? Because what's going on
yeah.
with you that you feel like this is as good as it gets? And I think
Yeah.
we miss that part sometimes.
Oh, that's so true. It's so crazy because, right before I got on here, I was just having a conversation, and it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of about like care. And my issue was like more so just like building that bond and that tight relationship
Yeah.
to where I know your triggers. Like, I know what's going to take you there. I know what's going to upset you. I know what's going to hurt you. And if I really do care about you, my whole job is to like figure out a way to like communicate things with you to where I won't make you feel all of those types of ways.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if I truly do care about you, I don't want you to, be taken to like that level. And I think that a lot of times, like, you don't have to pay to be in a relationship. It's so easy to say we together, we go together. It's so easy to do that. And I think that the part that is missing is like all of the stuff that it takes to actually be in a healthy relationship is so much than to just be like, I'm in a relationship.
Right.
Like, some people just don't even know how to be in a relationship. They
And
just want to call it one.
that's important, man. Like, because you actually got to be honest with yourself. If you come from some of the environments from which we come from, you probably never saw a good example of a relationship. If you did, you might have seen it on TV, but then that becomes some abstract thing that doesn't necessarily seem attainable because you ain't never seen it around you. You know what I'm saying? So, like, all you know is what you've seen. And the
Yep.
reality is, like, and that's okay. Ain't no shame in that, right? We all come from where we come from, and we all know what we know until we learn and are exposed to something else. So I definitely agree with you with that fact of like, sometimes we just need to step back and be honest and be like, I don't know how to do this thing, right? Like, I want this healthy relationship. I want
Yep.
love. I want a family, but I don't
Yep.
know how.
Yep.
And I think we got to get to a place where we can really be honest about that. Cause a lot of times you got a lot of like grown children out here playing at
Yep.
adulthood. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So
Oh, that's such a good point. It's so true. Just being vulnerable enough to even say what you don't know and like how you do want to feel. Like, how do you
yeah.
want to feel in this relationship with me? Like, is this relationship just gonna be based on like sex and like
No.
us just like taking nice pictures together?
Yeah.
Like, if that's the case, no, for real,
No, for
because
real.
that's the stuff that I'm saying. It's very
Yeah.
easy to just call it a relationship, but like there is no like depth to like nothing. Like, we
Yeah.
have nothing, literally just a surface level relationship, and it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah,
And,
that's not,
yeah.
we're not gonna grow like that.
And
Like, that's
people,
not gonna, yeah.
and people get mad at that, but that's been my thing that I realized recently, like, and just, getting to know people or whatever. People want to move at whatever pace. And before, like, when I was younger in different situations, I might have let someone else dictate the pace that was uncomfortable for me. But now I'm like, no, I want to see you in different seasons. I want to know how you navigate anger. I want to see how you are
Yep.
when life is going well. How do you respond when life is hard? Because life will always have
Yes.
its challenges. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yep.
and one thing I've been quick to say is like, you don't know me. And people get really upset and take offense to that. But I'm like, not even saying that to be mean, but someone's like, I really like you. You don't know me. You know what I'm saying? Like, we
Exactly.
don't have that foundation and we're
And they ready
building
to
that.
go from there. Like, I like
Right.
you. No, you like how I look. You think that I'm cool. You probably want to sleep with me, but
Yeah.
this is not like, I want to. It's just got to be way deeper for
Yeah.
me. It's just got to be way deeper. But again, like, that's just us. Like, we are a lot more mature. Like, we do have like people around us who've taught us the difference between right and wrong. Like,
Yeah.
we've had experiences with like people from like other places, different types of relationships,
Yeah.
like all of that stuff. Like, fortunate enough to like know what healthy looks like in
Yeah.
some cases and stuff like that. And yeah, unfortunately, some people are looking at like all of the things that are like extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, if you're a lesbian or
Yeah.
not, like, yeah, it's just like everybody. Like,
Yeah.
we all seeing people on the internet. We all seeing it. But it's just like, how are we gonna take that thing and apply it to our lives, or is this gonna actually be applied to our
Well,
lives?
right. Is this worth it? Because what we see a lot of times on social media is people playing Russian roulette with relationships. Like, every time you turn around, somebody with someone new. And what that really indicates to me, because it happens in real life too, is that people are incapable of being with themselves.
Yep.
Because if you
Oh yeah, definitely.
have you done the
Yep.
work to heal? Do you know why that last situation didn't work out?
Yep.
Like, it's on like two things. Like, one thing is like, also I don't want to move away from the fact of like that sometimes people end up in bad situations because they don't know better, right? Whether you're the victim or the abusers, right? So I think
Yep.
I also want people to have like grace with themselves and getting the help that they need, right?
Yeah.
Because also, if you know that like, man, I keep doing this same thing in every relationship I get in, and people keep leaving, but that's not even what you want, right? You actually want people to stay. You want to
Yep.
be loved, but you got these like, you have these traumatic experiences that are still haunting you. Then like, you gotta face the fact that you might need help that you cannot provide to yourself.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'll tell anybody, like, I got a standing appointment with my therapist every week. And
Yeah.
most people would say that I'm like a super healthy, whatever human being, but I'm not where I am just because of me. Like, if all I had was me, if I didn't have the support system that I have, if I didn't have like the education and pedigree or whatever, then I wouldn't even be cognizant enough to know that like, I'm not like, just me trying to do this on my own is not enough.
Man, it's the whole stigma. See, like, man, people don't want that though. People
I'm
don't
not,
want to sit up and tell somebody who don't know them their business and how their inner thoughts and like how they truly feel about things and things that they've gone through in the past. Like it's not even a thing that's super easy to do. And like so when they do find somebody, that they can like, share their secrets with
yeah.
and like tell all those things, they're looking for somebody that's just like them to be able to say that stuff to.
But
So
so
like,
here's
mhm.
no, I agree, but like what it really comes from the also is a piece like a place of shame
Yep,
because you don't want someone else to judge you by,
yep,
and that's why sometimes it's nice to have this person who really they like it's kind of like a I don't want to say bipartisan, but it's just like a neutral, like someone who's neutral, right? Like they don't
mhm,
really, sometimes that's nice. They don't know you. They don't know these people, right? Like,
right,
so it's also just an objective like opinion. And I get that sometimes you want to do it with your partner, but I
yeah,
think that people actually don't realize that there's a term for that. It's called trauma bonding. And
yep,
I've done that with a lot of people, right? Like we
yep,
both have these traumatic past
yep,
experiences and sharing that with each other. You're like, oh my God, we have so much
yep,
in common together. And that just escalates it going at a more rapid pace, but you're bonding over the wrong things. That's not a real
yep.
foundation. You know
Yep.
what
No,
I'm
you ain't
saying?
never lied. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, that is what we see. That is exactly what we see. They are bonding over their traumas. They're
Like,
bonding over, like, the loss of loved ones. They're
yeah,
bonding over, like, growing up in the same community and seeing the same things. Like, they're bonding over, like, the sexual abuse and everything
yeah,
else. Like, seeing their parents be abused or, like, seeing
yeah,
their parents dating a bunch of different people and bringing them in the house. Drug abuse. Like,
yeah.
that is what they are bonding over, when in reality, like those should be things that like that is something to talk to a therapist about. Because at the end of the day, like what is a therapist actually supposed to do, Portia? It is not to necessarily like fix you or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's supposed to be able to,
Like guide you into acknowledging like in one identifying the issues within yourself, and
right,
then for the areas where you need to grow, not issue areas in which you need growth and healing within yourself, and then to help you get there, right? Like they can't do it. It's hard work all the time.
exactly.
Also, yeah, because sometimes I think in relationships, like even so let's say you've done some self-work, right? You've done some self-healing and you feel like I can't help this person. That's not on you, because sometimes what often happens in trying to help someone else, what you don't realize is happening is like you're becoming re-triggered yourself.
Yep.
So in trying to provide that support to someone else, like you're also just like you're one trying to heal yourself and now you're trying to heal someone else. And unfortunately, most of the time you can't do both at the same time. Like the
Yep.
other person has to be able or has to be willing to do that work within themselves and for themselves. Like I think that sometimes we forget self-work is self-work. You know what I'm saying? Like the person has to be willing to do it themselves. And then hopefully y'all can maybe grow together. Or maybe y'all need to do this separately. And if it's meant to be, y'all will come back together. And I think people got
Yeah.
to realize that too, that codependency that
Yeah.
happens all the time. Like you got to understand that like at the end of the day, we all want someone to love, but if you don't have you within yourself, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, that's a lot. And I by no means want to make it seem like this is easy
It
by
is
any
hard.
means. Yeah. And also like sometimes people need help that you honestly can't give. I had to realize that like, man, this person's been through a lot and I really want to be here for you, but I literally have no idea how to
Where
handle this
to
situation.
start? Where to even start? Yeah. And I know Dottie, she also, I like watched a little interview of hers, and I know, they would ask her a bunch of questions about like just being a part of like the biker gang and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And she just like mentioned like, yeah, a lot of times like, the police won't let us ride the bikes in the streets because it's supposed to be illegal and all this stuff. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's kind of crazy because y'all not really bothering anybody. And she's like, yeah, I know, like this actually does help some people, like people who would have been selling drugs or like out here
Yeah.
committing crimes and killing people and stuff like that. Like now they riding these bikes and
Yeah.
they not getting into trouble, because now more people will be like outside watching us like ride or like as some type of like little, I don't know,
No.
dirt bike on. I don't know what they call them. So like like yeah, she was just saying like it's really saving a lot of people. And like she didn't say it, but like that was probably saving her too. Like that
Oh,
was probably the thing.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, she was still there. So like you are still around the same things that you just mentioned that, some people not doing. Like you are still around it. Now
Yeah.
it's probably not gonna be, as much as it was before when y'all are riding. Of course, like y'all not committing crimes at the same time y'all riding, y'all
Right.
not selling drugs at the same time you riding, stuff like that. like people in your community are doing all those same things. Like they are getting into fights, they are getting killed, they
Yeah.
are like selling drugs and stuff like that. So it's just a shame that, you know, it's just a whole lot easier for you to like just growing up in certain areas, being a lesbian, being an African American lesbian, like it's just so much easier for you to like get into that fight with your partner and, you know, just expect things to just go back to normal. I don't know, it's just crazy to
I
think
mean,
about. Like,
it is, but honestly, like once you have and experience something different, you just realize that, like, how something unnecessary that is.
yeah,
there's nothing like peace, right? Like peace of mind, peace within
yeah,
your home, like all of that. And it's hard sometimes because we know as Black people, outside of being queer, right? We know the oppression and struggles we go through every day, right? As a
yep,
people, whether or not you feel it specifically in your life, you still feel the weight of it all.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So it's like sometimes because you're like, you have that empathetic part and you know exactly where that person is coming from. And so you get it. But also, just in understanding something doesn't mean improvement doesn't need to occur, right?
yep,
Like I can get it. I can get why it's happening. I can understand all of that. But what do you want? Because do you want
yep,
to be better? Do you want to be different? Or do you
yep,
think that this is okay?
yep,
And if you do think that that's okay, then that's a problem.
yep,
And like, you ain't got to change for me, right? That just may mean that, like, at this point in time, you can't be in my life. And I
yep,
think we got to be willing also to have those hard conversations, because I'm not by no means saying you grew up in the hood, you can't never talk to your friends from the hood, you can't never hang with them.
right,
I never want to spread that message. But some people aren't willing to change and grow.
yep,
And at that point, you got to make a decision for yourself.
mm-hmm,
What do you actually need? And is this benefiting you? Like, for instance,
yeah,
last situation, like that person reached out recently and I was really proud of myself because I didn't answer and I didn't call them back, right? But a part of myself actually wanted to, like, man, are they okay? Like, wanting to know. But the thing also is, well, like for me, it's been like a value add. Like, I understand why that person still wants me in their life. I by no means can understand like how them being in my life would benefit me. And
oh
I
my
don't.
God, Portia, you have no idea. Literally, the last 3 or 4 minutes of you talking had this is legitimately the conversation I just had. And I just said, I can understand why you want me in your life, but I'm trying to figure out what would you add to my life.
Yeah.
It's so deep. And
And
at
that's
the end of the
hard.
day, I
Yeah.
gotta know what I want. So
And what you like, people throw the deserve out there and some people like are against it. But really, like, what you deserve is like really thinking about, like, what do I bring to a table? Because I'm never gonna ask for what I cannot offer, right?
mhm,
Like, are we growing together? Are you trying to build generational wealth? How do you prioritize healing? You know what I'm saying? Like, because these are things that are important to me.
yep,
So if you think X, Y, and Z is dumb, or you think whatever is stupid, like, go figure that out. Like, that's just my thing. Like, just go figure that out. Because be honest with yourself. Because I think a lot of times as well, people are scared of
mhm,
change and are scared of something. People may want something different, right? They just have
mhm,
no idea how to get there. So sometimes they want to bring you down because they don't know how to
yeah,
get there. So they want you at their level.
right.
But I think the important thing for people to know and understand is, at the end of the day, all of us are accountable for ourselves and accountable to ourselves.
Hmm.
So are the decisions that you're making, and are the decisions that the people around you who say that they love you are making, in order for you to be the best version of yourself.
Dang, it's true. That's it. That was it. Cut.
Cut. But for real, I just want people to like grow, man, and be healthy. Um, and just, you take it one day at a time, but also like don't put yourself in a situation of sacrificing yourself for someone else.
Yeah. And it's so hard too, especially like, you know, in certain situations that we don't look at as being like, maybe it's not unhealthy in a way where it's like physically abusive or like
Mm,
mentally abusive, but it could be like the emotional like aspect of it. Like, I'm not happy
yeah.
because of like how things are. And like, that's also something that you should probably be like, to take into consideration. Like, don't just let people continue to be who they are, you know. Um, well, you can let them continue to be who they are, but don't just accept people exactly how they are if that isn't, you know, necessarily the thing that's like making you happy.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't always have to be because someone cheated on you. It doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
have to be, yeah, because they put their hands on you and stuff like that. Like, maybe they honestly just aren't bringing to the table the same thing that you are not, and it's okay. Because
Mhm.
I think like sometimes like by it being like levels to this whole thing, people
Mhm.
always think like, yeah, like, I mean, she was crazy, but she wasn't that crazy. Like, what does that
Right.
mean? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, now all of a sudden she's like at the highest of crazy because, she murdered someone,
Yeah.
which probably wasn't, purpose. Like, she probably
Right.
didn't, it was just like that, how you just said, like the rage she was taking there or whatever. But, yeah, but like she wasn't crazy when they would be arguing in the street. She wasn't crazy when, they would just like, be arguing over the phone and stuff like that. She wasn't crazy until, it was taken to that point. So it's just like, just see it early on and like be able to acknowledge that stuff early on. That's why I say these are conversations that need to happen like before we actually make it official. Like we need to know like you just said, like how do you prioritize like your maintaining your health and stuff like that. Just like
Mhm.
all those things need to be like a conversation early on if those are the things that you truly do value. And maybe it'll be because of your past experiences, and maybe it's
Yeah.
not. Maybe it's just stuff that like you value as a person just by
Yeah.
yourself, don't have nothing to do with nobody else. Like,
Right.
do you work out? Like if that's the thing that you truly do value, like ask those questions. Like, hey,
Yeah.
do you like exercise and stuff like that? Like have those conversations to really get to know one another, um, before getting into something so deep that you don't even know how to get out of it.
No, for sure. And I also another thing I want to just comment on quickly is also just like the people who are around folks, right? The people who people consider their friends and their family and their community.
Hmm.
Because I think for me a big thing is like I actually don't want to date anyone that my friends don't like. And people may view that some type of way, but it's because like I'm very, as you know, I'm very selective with the people who are around me, and it's especially the terminology of friend, right? Because for me, that's family. So I know that these people who are around me have my best interest at heart,
Hmm.
right? So if I'm out of line, I know they'll call me out. And if they feel like something isn't of great benefit to me, I know they'll acknowledge that. So I bring it up for two reasons. One, if you are doing things that are either abusive or you're in a situation where you're being abused and no one in your immediate circle is trying to either check you or support you, then you may need to find a different group of people who you consider family and friends.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just be clear that like those around you like really are trying to move in the direction that you're trying to go in. Because I do
Hmm.
think that that energy that you surround yourself with does impact where you are spiritually and then also just the where you're moving toward in life. So if you want something different and you want something better, if that isn't immediately around you, seek that out. Right? We live in especially currently with the pandemic, we all in a house, right? So there's so many different resources online, people you can reach out to. Don't be scared to like put yourself out there. You don't have to be super forthcoming with all your business, but if there's someone you admire, reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
All right. So I think this was a really good talk, and I really hope that folks get something out of it. Um, I'm not a psychologist by any means, but been through a lot. And I think that like if you really need someone to reach out to or you want help and what resources you can get to, you can definitely feel free to send me an email at MsMalcolmHughes@gmail.com. All that information is below. But I just want folks to know that like you're not the only person who's gone through a situation like this. And you won't be the last person, unfortunately. But to be kind to yourself and to take it one day at a time and to really know that the person that you desire to be is possible and the love that you desire to have is possible. It just may not be in this current situation. Any last thing you want to say?
Nah, I mean, same thing that you just said, honestly. Um, Seeking like the supports and stuff like that and not being afraid to,
Yeah.
and not thinking that there's a problem with like talking to people about issues who actually can help. Like don't be afraid to like seek help, and if you don't know how to, um the internet has everything we could ever desire. I
For
tell my kids,
sure. For
I even
sure.
tell them that when they try to cheat on an assignment and they get it wrong, I'm like, it is virtual learning. How are you cheating and still getting it wrong? The internet is right there.
Yeah.
So now, like, just like utilizing like those resources that are
Mhm.
out there. Portia, I don't know if you're gonna link anything to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool if you can link something to this, and just staying safe and Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you for joining. One last thing before we wrap up. I do an in the podcast tarot where I just draw a tarot card from my love deck and really just try to whatever word that people need to hear at this time. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so here's a card that fell out.
Oh no, we won't be able to see it.
Yeah, it's the freedom card. It says there's nothing stopping you. The path is clear if you want it to be. And here's another one. This is another card that fell out. It says power. You instinctively know what is right for you, and you have the power to say no or walk away at any time.
Wow,
Right?
these were right on point.
There was three that fell out. And the last one is sexual union. Honor the place in one another where you are one eternal soul, for there you will find true bliss.
That was for
So
me.
that was for you. But I think that the message that's really coming through in this, when you think of freedom, like if you're in a situation that you know is unhealthy, like you can't leave, right? You're not stuck. I think that's a big thing that people sometimes overlook is that feeling of feeling stuck. Like you have no other option. And then just also that power, that internal power, like even if you don't sometimes have the word for it, you know intuitively if something is not right for you. Right? Because I've experienced that a number of times. And sometimes I'm still gone for it. And it's ended horribly. But that's a choice that I made. So I think that like we have to listen to ourselves and like have that trust in ourselves and not doubt that just because you don't have the words to explain it, just because something, if it doesn't feel right, then that is enough.
Yeah.
Right. And that sexual union, like that help, like sex, like there's nothing wrong with sexualness or being sexual, but it should be healthy and it should be a place where you two are like honoring each other, especially if you're talking about this is a union and you're trying to build together.
Right.
So that's it. That's what I got.
That was great.
Thank you for joining. And until next time, I just want everybody to be kind to each other and remember to practice grace and to just give it one day at a time. Strive to be, today should be better than yesterday. And that's all we got. It's not for the kids. Bye, girl.
Bye.
It's gonna hurt, I know. It always hurts to grow. There are lessons in the pain. Only the strong go insane. Don't get scared to try. You get scared to fly. But the turbulence is better than getting left behind. Don't get left behind. I don't know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it is. But I know when I get there, when I find it, it's for me.